Doc, what does a week look like in trying to use all of these zones so that people can get a better understanding of what that should look like versus maybe what they have been originally doing?
Yes. No, thank you for bringing that up. And I would take this with a grain of salt because each person has to be very specific based on past injuries. So take this partially with a grain of salt, but as an example that you can fill in. We'll have an image on the screen as well. So Monday through Sunday, the focus can be either a high stimulating focus. So we're going into the stimulating zone, higher intensity. You start noticing, okay, maybe for this Monday specifically, we're going to work on 1 to 2 like strength hypertrophic sets to either failure with maybe one main movement. So whether it's the squats on, we want to address all the muscle tissue, maybe starting off in the mid range, like the mid portion of the quads or mid glutes. And we want to work like a continuous like squat working set until failure at different either pulsations or different like depths into that squat. Or when you're at the bottom of the squat, are you able to either rotate a little bit to the side so you can bleed energy to certain sides of the muscle belly of the quads, glutes. You can add in maybe into a squat, add in a little bit of rotation. With this, you probably want to lower the weight if you're going to test different zones of movement, because you're going to send the stimulating effect much quicker to the untrained tissues versus, let's say, if you want to send the signal at a higher straining or higher stimulus, just your normal everyday squat that has perfect form. Then you want to go till failure, maybe just working in different zones or going slowly into a deep squat, staying there, maybe working up maybe 25% out of your deepest area of the squat and work back down. So you're constantly staying under load in different ranges for as long as you possibly can.
Yep.
So we're sending that signal Monday. You can work in maybe some detraining calves, feet work, or isometrics when all your muscles or all your legs are straight. You're just squeezing the connective tissue or the whole muscle belly. So that can be like a signal sent that day as well. If you want to, you can either focus from the legs, from the squats, to something of like bis, tris, detraining, wrist forms, fingers. You can do that detraining as well. Okay, so let's go into Tuesday then. Tuesday is going to be the recovery and mobility, so we're detraining. So we went high stimulus. We're going to go back to homeostasis, bring everything back to center, detrain. Still doing activity, effort, work, but we're working on a different part of the body. So maybe instead of muscle tissue building, we're working on cardiovascular health. So then we can go into like zone 2 cardio for maybe a lower intensity, just getting into a nice easy jog for a longer period of time, upwards of like maybe 30 minutes before getting on, whether it's treadmill, bike, elliptical, doesn't matter for the most part, doing full body cars, workspaces, full range of motion for each joint, and then slowly start to warm up like in a running stance, so you can so you can prep those tissues going into a jog and then go into the jog afterwards. And if you want to do from there, maybe afterwards like a foam rolling session with a pin and stretch. So you foam roll in a tight area and then move that limb where you're moving around it, so you can create glide between tissues. Whether you want to go into, let's say, a deep stretch, so you want to almost open up fascial plasticity to turn down what's known as the gamma motor tone. Maybe then we're holding certain areas of stretching for anywhere upwards of 2 to 30 minutes for each muscle belly. You can get into that on that day. I wouldn't go too intense or too long on this like a static stretching. And if so, when you get into that stretch, force a very small muscle contraction as you're stretching so you can utilize that length. So Tuesday, recovery day. Now, Wednesday, we're going to get back into retraining, and then this could also be certain skills. So if you're an athlete, maybe you're working on technique for a soccer player, dribbling, ball work, juggling to a certain extent, versus someone that is maybe a bodybuilder. The skill, effort, and then pretty much the training itself kind of work in the same fashion. So let's, for example, a hang clean is more of a skill movement because you have to have decent technique so you don't injure yourself. So depends on what skill you want to work on there, but I would keep it moderate intensity, low to moderate intensity, whether it's workspaces, trying to get to that fullest range of motion, pushing that line of tightness for each area that either you're working for the day or full body. And then you can get into some pattern work of not putting, let's say here, not necessarily pushing the highest amount of intensity, but working on either certain body parts, whether you want a lower or upper day, but we're slowly ramping back up. And then that's where we get to Thursday, to where you have a stimulating set. Now, maybe for this one, we're going to isolated, focus on like hypertrophy on certain weak points of when we do our workspace, maybe certain parts of what joint we find to be more weak for that day. We're trying to accumulate and grow and get into more space. So we get into the workspace, full range of motion. That's where, going back to the example, we put our arm up against the wall. We force the highest amount of intensity either into the wall or isometrically squeezing without moving your arms, and then or up off the wall opposite direction. And that's where we can build up, because we only need one signal sent, maybe 2 to 3 reps max for certain body areas, maybe 1 to 2 max on different parts for that day. And this can be in different body areas, but it gives you a good idea in terms of the signal. And then, much like you would think, high stimulation, and then we're going to go down to detraining. There's Friday active recovery, whether it's a mobility, very low intensity circuit, more blood flow work. You can get a massage, a lymphatic drainage. You can get into like meditative breath work for that day as well. And then Saturday, much like you would think, we're going to ramp back up. Strength skill day, maybe high movements, 70 to 80% effort. Don't want to grind through this. You don't want to be maxing, but we're sending the signal for whatever body area you want to work that day. And then Sunday, again, detrain, longer cardio session, breath work, guided stretching. So when we're sending the high amount signal one day, you can either go a couple days on setting the signal and then offload. But when you first start off, if you go high intensity one day, you want to deload the next. That's more why for this flow chart. The more trained your tissues get, the higher, and that goes back to the intensity aspects. You have to be more strategic with the signal. Then you can get into phases of 6 weeks hypertrophy, to we're saying that signal maybe 2 to 3 days in a row, and then we're offloading for maybe a couple days. Maybe we're going to ramp up before going on a trip. And then when you get out of the trip or during the trip, we can slowly ramp back up. You can get into these cycles as well, but you need that recovery aspect. You need the detrain, the offloading. You can't push the maxes for upper body one day, core the next day, and then lower body the next day. There are only so many resources in our body to build up from there.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there are different days you can try to stimulate while detraining, but you're saying we want to try to completely leave it at a different zone each day then. To a point.
Work.
Yeah, of course.
I think it depends on
As a
what you
bodybuilder, that
train
might
for.
be different.
Slightly, but
Yeah.
we're even seeing bodybuilders that are training 3, maybe 4 days a week, and they're still keeping their gains. But during those sessions, they have to make sure their body is fully recovered,
Sure.
or a
As best as it, yeah.
decent amount recovered, to where when they send that signal and then they go an off ramp and back off, get into more of a recovery status. Again, we know all the growth occurs in the recovery sleep,
Yeah.
all that. So theoretically, it would make sense to where you don't need to be in the gym 24/7, 7 days a week.
So they're almost becoming engineers of their tissues. Like they are stimulating it with the most intense stimuli that they can think of that works best for them.
Yes.
And then they're understanding physiology, they're detraining and then recovering.
Yes.
And making sure that what the hard work that they just put in gets its best effects with sleep and growth in the off time.
100%.
And
That's so
it's
smart.
such a different thought process than I think what we're used to.